14 is, I brought my notes on the communication plan in the car. So I need to run to get those before we have.
Before the meeting's right.
All right, so
Oh, new business, okay.
we will call the JPNL meeting to order at 6:04. And the first item on our agenda for tonight is considering the organization analysis service agreement. So who wants to kick that off? Tyler, you
I
want
will
to kick
kick,
it off?
sure, I will kick that
Awesome.
one off.
Thank you.
Just so you know, I have items 1 and 2,
Yep.
and then Sarah will have item 3. I'm trying to get done by 6:30 because I have another item in 6:30, but
Okay.
if we're not done, I have to leave to the other room, but Becky can still take over for the first 2 items.
Okay.
So item 1 is the org analysis service agreement. And Trustee Carpenter, feel free to chime in anytime you want because you've been involved with this one. So as you know, the board passed this as a priority for the upcoming year. So we got a head start on working on a RFP that we ended up getting 5 proposals, all pretty good proposals on. After interviewing, I think it was safe to say that there were 2 that we really liked that came to the front. And that was GovHR and Novak Consulting Group. I think in a, if we had kind of, I don't wanna say an unlimited budget, but if budget or financial constraints weren't a factor, I think most of the team agreed that Novak Consulting Group, we felt, would do the most thorough job in doing the analysis. But with them, they're an outside group. They're like a national consulting firm that spends a lot of time doing these. So because of the fact they're outside, extra dollars have to be spent on transportation and flying them in to come, which increased their proposal. So because of that, we ended up putting together a draft service agreement with GovHR and recommending them. But we wanted to make sure to have a full discussion to see what your standing committee feels, kind of the difference between the 2. We still think GovHR could do a good job and would be able to accomplish quite a bit, but we did have a level of confidence with Novak. So that was just one discussion I just wanted to inquire about. And then the other question is I wanted the standing committee to help narrow down, the defined goal of what we really want to accomplish. And the reason why I say that, and Becky, I know you have thoughts on this too, is that there's no really one right way to provide a service. So what would end up happening is the consultant would put together a bunch of options that you could do for a type of service. They would provide, the financial impact if you were to contract out, other social and political factors to consider. But in the end, when they make the recommendation, they could do a recommendation based on, what's the best way to carry out the service, or a recommendation based on fiscal impact, based on what maybe makes everyone the most happy, etc. So I think that's where we just really need some work, and maybe that's for a full board discussion when we're also discussing the service agreement, so everyone is part of that discussion. But we just need clarity on what that prime objective is before we sign the service agreement and get started. So those are the 2 discussions that we're hoping to have before proceeding to the full board.
So, and just to kind of give like a little additional information, yeah, we definitely liked Novak, but I think we also felt like GovHR's compensation background could also provide us some additional information throughout the analysis. That was why we sort of leaned in that direction that some of the other groups couldn't provide.
Yeah, the advantages for GovHR is they know our organization, they did the village management recruitment, so we already have some work chemistry with them. Not that should be the reason we go with them, but it is a factor. They're also a little bit more local, so they have probably a stronger understanding of the local municipalities that would be part of that benchmarking and comparative analysis when looking at other services. It's also a regional firm, so they would have some other benchmarks that aren't just Wisconsin, but in the Midwest area. So those would be some advantages of them compared to
But
certainly to know
You
that.
ranked them on this chart.
We
right?
did, correct.
Okay, and the only question I have on the chart, is understanding of approach. And if I read both proposals, and I would say that both Novak and HR were, I would flip those, I would say 5 was Novak and 4 was, depending on what the approach was, that you're thinking of. So I just wanted to say that, because if that was the case, then Novak would have definitely been up.
So, I just to kind of clarify, Novak, when their original cost was like out of the water.
Well, I'm not talking about
and-
the cost line, they still can stay at 1 for cost.
Sure.
I was just talking about the understanding of approach. They got 4 and
The-
got 5.
Well, I would say, sorry.
Well, I remember the reason why we did that was GovHR included a public forum in their proposal. Novak does not.
Yeah.
So we thought,
That's what your approach
so
is.
when we were talking about, that was one of the reasons why we did, but that could be something that through the discussion here, that if we went Novak, but if that was something important, or that was important, we wanted to pay the additional amount on top of that, we could talk with them to incorporate that. But I think that was the main reason why we gave them the 5 over Novak.
And I mean, it just, Shorewood, being Shorewood I felt like we couldn't have this type of discussion without having some public input and having some opportunity for public engagement. And I know this sounds like Novak's presentation was great, but they were also the only group that didn't come in for it. And I felt like that sort of says a lot. I'm sure some of it is that they were totally over budget, so I think they maybe knew that, but, I think that says something.
Yeah, so they called in, it was in,
That's correct.
so when they scaled back their proposal, is the scaling back, do you think that?
The main thing that scaled it was originally, and all the other proposals still have this in there, they have individual interviews with each employee, every single employee.
Right.
So now Novak does not, instead what they do is they just have a survey that they would distribute
Okay.
online and everyone can fill it out that way. So that saves a lot of their hourly cost. That was the only way that we could get Novak into a reasonable
Okay.
discussion.
And you recommend why you would Novak would be better than GovHR? Boy, the cost differential, this is such an important study. I think we shouldn't let 13,000 or whatever variable, we're spending over 10, 20 million a year here. So this is a pretty important study, so it needs to be done right, so.
If you took cost out of the proposal, I think is your
Right, I'm
question.
saying, yeah, it shouldn't be.
Would you recommend a Novak at the scaled down version without the I think you would, because that gives you 4 more points. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's like it was
If
the
you
hugest
adjust,
factor.
if you adjust the points, Novak would have
Mhm.
gained more points than GovHR.
Well, but even, before the scaled down version, their original proposal wasn't at like $30,000.
It was 72.
Yeah, that's what they got.
It was at
Right,
72
right,
total.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it was-
and so that, they came back with the scaled back version, and just, to me, obviously, that's a lot closer than
Right.
where, than the 72, but, I just, we also cut out, we kind of reconfigured it as we were discussing to include everybody in this building.
You can, I'm sorry if I missed that part, but
Yeah,
I
I
did.
did, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm curious about that because,
Hey, we don't know how to turn on the camera.
oh, it's coming, because I mean, my suggestion was to go with, go with that one, but just do DPW to keep the cost down, because when you have a 2-person department, the original reason that, I went back and looked at where this came, and it came from the three priorities, and it was one of the ones I suggested, which I just said, let's look at staffing, compare staffing to other places, and do per capita costs to compare to other places. But I mean, and I'm glad that it's become a more broader thing, but I mean, I think it was always a way for us to be able to maintain costs, low costs, as salaries go up, and efficiency, right? So I'm not sure how you're gonna find efficiencies in finance. Or the clerk, for example, we're completely redoing parking, we may be looking at totally new technologies. I mean, so there's a lot that's gonna be happening with parking, like at least a quarter to a third of the clerk's office, I don't know, something like that, right? So I mean, or your office, there's two of you, I mean, I'm not sure where we're gonna find efficiencies in finance, planning, we've already found efficiencies there, you know, I don't think we're gonna, anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious why the thinking was of all these other departments.
The main reason centered around clerk and customer service, and as you look at some of the other departments, they have, you know, a direct impact in connection with them. I mean, finance, for me, is a really good example when it comes to, you know, because they're gonna look at all of the services. So they're gonna end up looking at like processing tax bills, which has a direct impact with, you know, finance, and AP has, you know, there's a lot of processes that are involved with clerk and customer service that hit the different areas.
Isn't it true too, when you came to us with I just remembered this, I'm sorry, but the job descriptions, it was like, well, we're gonna take that from the clerk, we're gonna put it in finance, we're gonna take that from because it was a new clerk, and it was like, so I don't know if everybody was around for that time, but I'm thinking that is a good explanation of, like, where does the tax bills reside? It's just been it hasn't been very formalized, the job descriptions have been mixed around. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. The other example I would give is utility billing, which, you know, sure, DPW is involved, but finance and customer service are involved with utility billing too. So that's where it gets really hard if we say just DPW. You know, when you get to the utility billing section, it's not just DPW, there's other departments that are involved with that process. So if we're looking for process improvements, you know, I think we just decided if we're already touching parts of some departments, let's just include all of them in that study.
But could we, I'm sorry, just go on my thinking, but could we start with DPW and then move on to, like, take other departments at a slower pace in future years, you know? I mean, if we wanna go with the higher quality, or the consultant that put the better proposal in, I'm all for that. I'd rather not spend more than the 30,000.
I think we definitely could. I think there would be some efficiencies doing them at once, but if you wanted to separate it out, I mean, Becky, do you see any?
You can separate it out. I do
Issue
think
with
that
it.
there will be efficiencies in doing it together,
Yeah.
because I think if we go out again for another, that with a service, like with Village Hall not being as,
Well, I mean, we're gonna go out again for, you were saying the next one, Senior Resource Center, so it could be
Mhm.
combined into that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sarah's thought, including customer service, was exactly what Tyler was saying, was also just that, you know, customer service and the clerk's office really do touch it, you know, everything, you know, from a resident's perspective, so,
I think it just boils down to, I'm sorry, to what you asked us, what is your goal for the study? Because, and then you can decide how many departments need to be in, because it makes sense if you have the money to do it all together, if there's efficiencies, if your delivery is what the staff is saying, which is efficiencies and service provisions. That makes sense. And I just wanted to say that, when I reviewed it, my immediate reaction was, for my goal of what I would like to study that has now become a little larger in scope than just staffing. My goal is very similar to priority budgeting, and I know I've mentioned that a bunch of times, but if you just look at the page that Novak has put together, it explains it very well. It's service delivery, because in the end, the reason that I would be wanting an organizational analysis is to know where we can find efficiencies, because our budgets are getting tighter every year, and it's not just us, it's everywhere in the nation.
Right,
It's-
but even if we get rid of services in Sarah's department, we're not gonna,
Right.
we can't really.
I'm totally with you.
We can't, we're not gonna
I agree with
let
you.
any of the four of them go.
I totally agree, and that's why I'm okay, so let me preface that, I'm fine with separating it out. So, because I do believe it's necessary, in the instance of, should a service be put in a different department, but I don't think that that is as critical, at the moment as, because you're right, I don't think there's gonna be staffing changes
No.
necessarily. I think there might be shifting of responsibility, or at least documenting of that facility,
Yeah.
you know, for a job description, I get that. I think what we talked about during budget was, and this came up in budget, that how it got bigger, was how do we become more efficient? Do we have too many vehicles? Do we have too much, I mean, are we, and so, when I read Novak's proposal, and I can't find the page right now, but with the little boxes all in a round thing, it's very much like priority budgeting, which is the newer thing. It talks about, in this day and age, what are the services absolutely required by state law, by your ordinance, by, you know, so you start there, and then it goes down to, at the very end, it gets to, and what do you want? It might be a great, the residents might really want this service, let's just pick leak vacuuming. It's not required by anything, you know, so they give you that ranking, and I think that's huge, thank you so much, yep, and the description, I think it's the last two paragraphs.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna need that, we don't have that documentation anywhere, and they're really good at documenting what the rest of the nation is doing in priority budgeting. And then, as for the public involvement, and this is gonna sound terrible, I'm saying it on camera, but this is, to me, if you're asking my opinion, this is an organizational analysis with my goal is to come out of it understanding the department better,